welcome to the Intuitively Wild podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Levine. Living intuitively wild is about coming back home to ourselves. Here, we talk about how to live connected to ourselves, others, and nature, and make a commitment to radical authenticity, vulnerability, and acceptance. On this podcast, we delve into a wide range of topics that span the human experience. We peel back the layers and talk about the things that are often not talked about. This is a space for us all to walk and wander this path of life together. Let's dig into our roots and go deep. Today on the podcast, we are joined by Thirza Voysey. We go deep into Thirza's journey of experiencing anxiety at a young age due to her overwhelming emotions and feeling like she needed to shut them down and hide them, and how she reconnected to herself and her sense of power and confidence and authenticity through the spirit of horses, and how that inspired her to start a whole new path and a whole new business with horses. We talk about how her daughter inspired this journey, how the horses have impacted her life and strengthened her intuition and her sense of wildness. We talk about what living wildly truly means and how she embodies that every day. This conversation goes in all different directions, as many do, because we are led by our intuition and our heart. And I am so inspired by the heart that is poured into all that Thirza does in her business and the intentions behind her business. And I cannot wait to share her voice and her message with you. She has so many amazing offerings that will be linked below, but I definitely want to do a special shout out for her book, The Wild in Us. It is such a beautiful book, and she's going on book tour in October, so definitely look into that if you're interested. And with all of that being said, let's get into the conversation with Thirza. Thirza, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm very excited.
Okay, question I love to start with is, what is something you wish people knew about you that you don't think many do?
I'm wondering if people do know this or don't know this, but I have a very big energy to myself. I feel a lot of it. I think that's partly why I had anxiety for a lot of my younger life, is because I have a lot coming through, and I'm realizing now a lot of it is creative art, making art. The more I make things, the more I've always moved. I've always done a lot of movement, dance, and different things. But I notice the more I create and self-express, then the more comfortable I am in myself. I did spend a lot of time hiding as a younger person. And so that just caused anxiety because there was all this energy in there. So I think that's a good one.
That's so interesting to me. I don't know how much you know about human design, but I have to bring this up right away because you have an emotional authority, and specifically you have the 2212 channel, which makes your emotional authority. And that's the channel that I have as well. And I've had a similar experience of shutting down my emotions and not knowing how to handle them. And that kind of turned into anxiety. And that channel is really about expressing your emotions. And yes, having big emotions, but using them to, it's your emotion center connected to your throat center. So sharing your emotions and voicing them and using them in this creative way and with this creative energy. I had to share that right away because I had a very similar experience with my emotions and have learned how to channel that in a new way. And it sounds like you have as well.
There you go. Yeah. I know a little bit about human design, but not a ton. So that's cool that we have the same one, and that's what it's about.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of anxiety, what did your experience with anxiety look like? Anything from that journey and that story of your life that you would want to share? I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, I'm pretty much an open book now. I did feel very alone with it as a kid. And what happened, and I wrote in my book about this, is that I felt when I was probably 6, 7, 8, I'm not sure exactly when, but I used to feel this big, like I said, the big energy moving through me. And I was such a little body, and I just didn't know about energy and nothing about it. And it just scared me. And as I was falling asleep, I would feel like I am the whole earth and I am the whole solar system. And kind of when it went beyond like what I could conceptualize as a little kid, then I would start to feel scared. And then I would feel like that energy inside my body, and that just felt really terrifying. And so I kind of, nobody took me aside and was like, this is your power. They were just, it just wasn't around me in that way. And so I just shut it down and turned into fear and turned into OCD and anxiety and different things that were always trying to control, trying to keep my world safe. And now I get it on a different level, that's what that is. It's a power, and it's intuition and all those things.
Our emotions feeling too overwhelming that we don't feel safe within ourselves. So we seek anything we can to try to feel in control and feel that sense of safety. Again, I had a similar experience. I think this is related to all we were talking about in the beginning. Learning that it is safe to feel my emotions and safe to sit with my emotions. And no matter what happens on the other side of them, I will be okay, has been, has really helped me navigate life. So I'm curious, what started to change the trajectory for you? What was the turning point in realizing that it was okay to feel these emotions and it was safe to feel those emotions, and how you figured out how to sit with them?
Yeah, I think for me, it really was bringing the horses into my life. And they're 1,000-pound beings, and they're very, very sensitive, and they're very powerful. And for me, that was like, okay, something's going on here. And they have emotion, and they will, if they're anxious or they're worried or they're mad or scared, often they will move, they will run. We have three of them on the farm here, and they live with us, and they can come right up to our kitchen window and things.
Wow.
And they will gallop past the window, and I'll be like, oh, and it's such an energy, and I'll walk out and be like, what's going on? And it's fun to watch them, but then I'm like, oh, they get themselves more and more worked up. But then as soon as they know that it's safe, they go back to grazing, and that's like their peaceful place. So they have a really quick shift from full of emotion to peace. And so I watched that, and I realized that as long as I'm being true about my emotions and honest with them, and in a way that I accept that I have this, I'm not pretending, I'm not being fake with them. As long as I'm being real, they accept that, and they don't care, and they'll blow, and it's all great and fine. And it doesn't feel dangerous to them for me to have big emotion. What feels dangerous to them is when I pretend that I don't, or when I fake it, or when I stuff it. That feels scary. That feels like a predator. And so that taught me a lot about how to be safe feeling that stuff and letting it roll through me.
That's so interesting, because the horses feel safe with your emotions. They just don't feel safe in the hiding of the emotions, in the fakeness. And I think that a lot of people can feel afraid of horses because they can be so easily activated or shift from one state of being to another. And so they try to keep themselves, still and controlled. And really, if we were able to just be natural and feel free amongst the horses, they would respond to that. So it's the energy of it all. People's fear of horses' emotionality represents their fear of humans' emotionality. We're so afraid of other people's shifting emotional states so quickly and having all these big emotions, when really we all need to feel safe and free of expressing them and accepting each other's expressions of our emotions.
Very much, yes. And I can see that they do, and especially some of them, like we have all females here, and some of them can really change their mind quickly. They feel safe, and then they don't feel safe. Like one of them, Luna, she came from auction, and she came from a really tough situation. She'd been treated pretty harshly, and she came just biting us and jumping fences, and just kind of chaotic and aggressive. And so for me, I was like, uh-oh, it's come into my life, thinking I didn't need it. But she's a really great mirror for me and for clients around trust, And how do you lean into that? And then when she also, us being human and coming to her and being something scary from her past, and then how do we help her to heal and to calm her nervous system and to see that, okay, this is a good interaction, this was safe, and so it could be safe again.
Mhm.
It's fascinating.
I feel like the people who are most afraid of nature and animals are the people who have had the least experiences with them. But the more I immerse myself in nature and with animals and plants and just the elements of nature, I feel more safe. I feel more grounded. I feel more at peace with myself. And I feel less like I need to grasp onto control somehow. And it just proves to me time and time again that nature, animals included in that, have all the lessons to teach us that we need. And when we are able to find comfort in that, we don't need to seek control. I wish that more people could have those experiences of connecting back to nature and connecting back to those roots that we all came from. What was your first experience with horses like? What was that first time that you connected with them?
I actually remember being probably about 10, and before I got horses, now I never had horses in my life, but I was remembering back to my childhood and how I visited with this friend who wasn't a close friend. She was kind of a friend of a friend, but I went to her farm by myself with her. I don't know, I asked my mom, but probably like 5 times. And the amount of space and joy that those 5 times take up in my childhood, I was like, I gotta listen to this.
Yeah.
And so she had a Shetland pony, Blue, who was a gray, like he was white. And she had Sunny, who was a paint horse. And we used to there was just a freedom around it. So we would ride them, but we'd get on bareback and she and her mom taught me a bit about jumping and those kinds of things. So, but it was always just really free. There wasn't a lot of this like control that we do with horses or people do with horses. It was a lot of freedom, and we just would go and like go through the bush and bareback, and it was just
Mm.
fun. It was just, yeah, and it felt like we were friends. And I hear this from a lot of people now who had been with horses when they were younger, is they built this connection with horses as kids, and they would kind of let them do whatever because they were, innocent and harmless. They weren't trying to hurt the horses. They were just trying to be friends.
Mhm. And then, so you had this experience with the horses when you were young, and then did you maintain that relationship with them? I think I think you've shared with me that you had a moment where you came back to them at a later time in your life. So what was that period in between like?
So grew up, I always wanted animals in my life. Didn't have like I felt like I really had to fight for animals, and I had bunnies because my parents didn't want anything bigger. And we had a dog and a cat, but it just wasn't, I always had these dreams of, being like Pippi Longstocking with the horse friend and the monkey friend and just being friends with all of the animals. So I didn't really have that, lived a real kind of suburban life, not a farm life. And then I had my own kids, and my daughter was really into the horses. And I didn't want her to just go and, get on a horse that was all tacked up and ride it for 45 minutes and get off and leave. I wanted her to build that connection with them. And so we found this ranch where they had 22 horses, and we would just go there, and there was a lot of freedom. And so we would just go trail riding, or but she would also it was like a pony club. She would also spend hours just feeding the horses and going out to the field and catching them and different things and building these relationships with them. And so we spent a ton of time there. And she actually went through a lot of anxiety too. And so I started to see, like, when she was they always put her on the biggest horses, and she was this little thing and put her up there. She would shine like a queen up there. Like she was just in connection with them, and with them and herself in a way that I hadn't seen in her. And then we'd get home and she'd be terrified and anxious and whatever. So I just noticed that energetic shift, and I'm always somebody who's always watching energy. And so I was like, what's here? What is going on? So then I was a social worker already, so I got into the training for equine facilitated wellness, and never left. Here we are.
Wow. And I think it's extra powerful that your daughter was such a key player in this story for you. I really believe that there's a special relationship. Of course, there's a special relationship always between kids and their parents, but even more so in the evolution of our lives and our paths. Like, I think we're here to teach each other something. And so it's so evident in your story that your daughter, it seems like she transformed your whole life path because now you have your farm, you have all your horses, and you've really created something so powerful there with the horses.
Yeah, and it's cool to see my older two are from my first marriage, and they lived a very different childhood, more suburban, more in the
Mm.
city. Then in my second marriage, we have a younger one who's 12 now, and he has grown up in my absolutely ideal life. Like he lived on the farm with all these animals, and we have three dogs. One of them's his, and he gets to, we just went on a big road trip, and it was him and I, and the dog goes everywhere. It's a really
Oh.
what I would have loved, and so I get to give that to them. The older ones hopefully will, they appreciate it, but they'll hopefully appreciate it in a new way when they have their own kids, if that's what they decide to do.
I'm in awe of that because that is, I mean, that's the childhood I hope to give to my kids one day. It's so special. One reason that I've been so excited to talk to you and that I knew we would get along is this framework around the word wild. Your book is called The Wild in Us. I'm curious how you define wild and what does wild mean to you?
So that's actually one of the reasons I reached out to you. I was like, she keeps popping up and she's using the same language, and I think she's using it in the same way or similar. But I've always really been connected to the soul. And when I went through divorce, I was like that. And that's in the beginning of my book. I was like, I am going to be the best me for me and for my kids. And I'm just going to follow what my soul says. And that might be hard. And it has been hard, and it's been amazing. But to really just commit, like I tried to do the way everybody told me was the safe way to do life. Like worked for the government. Went to university, got married, had two kids. And that didn't work out. When that blew up, I was like, well, I'm going to do it my way then. To me, the wild in us is very much our following our soul's path, and it's our most natural state, and the horses and all wildness, they're in their natural state, if they haven't been touched by humans or by different experiences, then they're really in that wild state. Always trying to help the horses get back to that as best they can, and live as naturally as possible, and for humans to really just live in what is natural for them, what comes through them, which is different for every one of us. Yeah, it's fascinating work to do this with all different humans too, and with the horses. They show up differently for every single person that comes, and they show different edges of growth and different reflections.
The horses are so intuitive. That's one reason why I wanted you to define what wild meant to you because it is so different for all of us. Because I think at the core of it, living wildly is living authentically, living intuitively. And we need to be able to connect to our intuition in a really strong way so that the rest of the world doesn't counteract that because it tries really hard to do so. And cultivating a life that strengthens our connection to our intuition, our authenticity, our wild is so important. And it sounds like you're doing that every day, but how do you maintain that? How do you connect to your wild every day? Because I think even when we set up our life in a way that supports that, it can still be challenging.
Totally. So I did definitely set up my life in this way where there's horses all around. We have all the animals. For me, it's a big deal. And I just learned this through trying different things. It's a big deal for me to have a couple of steps and then I'm on the earth, from my house. Like I tried living in like a house above with a suite under. I just felt so disconnected. And so definitely in nature, very sensitive to all the things, sound and all of that. It's very quiet here, and I just love that. But you're right, life is still like life is still life.
Yeah.
And busy can find you wherever you are. For me, coming into this office, and this was my husband's office and he built it for him. He's a graphic designer. And so it's separate from the house and it's perfect for him. And then we just I was in a room in the house and I just kept saying, I've never really had my space. And I'm very, again, sensitive and distracted by space and by what's going on. And so being in the house for years, like I have my office, but the cats are in there and there's like all this, if there's, cat food, and it just always distracting from my peace. And
Mm.
so I'd sit at the kitchen table and then I'd do the dishes, I'd do the whatever. So it was just this kind of like distraction circle and cycle. And so having all my things in my space, and I can bring, dogs in if I want, but I can also shut the door and keep everybody out like right now and have boundaries. That is my space to feel fully me. Otherwise, I just feel the other is great and the nurturing and the mom and all that, but it's not my creative space. And so this really feels like a physical space that I'm like, where has this been all my life?
Mhm. Mhm. Oh my, I relate to that so much. Space, environment, it impacts me so much. And it can shift the thoughts I have. It can shift how I feel in my body. It can shift my creativity and it can shift my perspective. I think it's so important to know what you need specifically and really honor that without apologies, without needing to explain ourselves. Like just being like, I need my own space. And not everyone has the same needs, and that's fine. But being able to know and honor and voice what we need, I mean, that's also living wildly because that takes courage and that takes being authentic and that can be really challenging. But I think it's so important.
Yeah. And I'm really growing in those ways. It was hard as a mom and still continues to be like, no, I'm doing this because it was really important to me to only work part-time and be there for my kids and, spend time with them growing up. And one of them's still only 12. But I do feel that confidence and that like, this is so important for me to even show them that I can be like, no,
Mhm.
this is my time. I'm alone. Ritual I've set up is of course feeding the horses every morning, but it's kind of a trick to myself because I do have a very busy Gemini mind. And
Mhm.
so before anything, I have to come down from upstairs, out of the house, all the way to the barn, feed the horses, visit with them, sit with them, meditate, do some movement. And so that's a huge grounding thing for me instead of just jumping into whatever is going on around me.
Rituals, morning rituals are everything for me. And I love that having that moment of connection with the horses and connection with nature and that signal to yourself that we're grounding and we're starting our day slowly, that sets the energy for the whole day. Okay, how do you describe horse medicine? Because I don't I would love, I'm not sure exactly what that is.
Yeah. So for me, it's basically we drop into a space where the horses are naturally helping us to ground into ourselves and open our hearts, basically, is what's happening. Ground into our bodies and open our hearts. And so they hold that space. And then I always say they show us our edges of growth. It's really just coming into the present moment with them, into an experience of both that feeling regulated in our nervous system, feeling safe, and then what comes then what shows up in the space of presence. And like I say, that's different all the time, different for every person, and different kind of each time they come. Some people come for one session and some people want to really come back. To my belief is that as you come back and back, they are helping you build your energetic strength. That's really what they're doing, which is in my book I talked a lot about the chakras and the energy centers. I've created this membership program where people are working. They can do it wherever they are. You can be across the world and find a horse or volunteer with a rescue or something where there's horses that you can try these energetic practices with and start to develop this relationship on a different level than other levels with horses. And so that's when I find when they get that relationship that they start to really help you to build that strength. And they pull you into the herd, and one session is fine and great. After going to India and being in an ashram there, I said to my husband, I said, I want this to feel like we felt there, where you're all of a sudden you're just in connection with yourself and the land and spirit, and everything is just aligned, right? And I want people to feel that when they come here. And I want it to almost be a little jarring when they leave, not nervous system jarring, but a little bit like, ooh, what was that? And I can see people as soon as they walk on the farm, they're breathing deeper, and they're like, this place is full of love. Horse medicine is a lot of aspects, but it's definitely all of those things. Like how does it feel to be in full presence and in my body, and then what shows up in that space. And sometimes there's a lot of time being spent getting into presence, right? Because we're not used to that. The juice is kind of like, okay, now we have that, we feel ourselves in our bodies, and then what is showing up for growth. And if each of the horses show up a little bit, with a lot actually, but with their own medicine. I just don't want to paint them with the brush of that, but so I'm always careful about that. But they do show up. Like one, Venus has had 8 babies. She was a broodmare, and so she really shows up often for grief, and she shows up for nurturing and mothering and those kinds of things. And we were just involved in the filming of a documentary, and there's a beautiful scene in there where she actually works with the mother of the person doing the documentary, and it's about people who have died by suicide. So it's quite an intensely emotional documentary. And Venus shows up in one of the scenes in just this intense love with this mom and healing. And they just go through this whole moment. And I'm like, there you are doing that work again. And it could have been any of them, but it was her. When she was even up on the deck of the barn, like on stage, this is my time to shine.
I love that so much.
They just astound me. I came into this work being like, okay, like I know energy, I understand it, and I have so much to learn, but show me what's really going on. Because you kind of start out unless you just start out super intuitively open, understanding it all. But for me, I had to kind of learn what horses were doing, what was going on. And I was also really careful about talking about kind of too much of the witchy, intuitive spirit stuff at the beginning, and now go right into it. I know if people show up here, they're always highly sensitive. They're always not always super open. Like often I will feel that the horses aren't being fully let in. We have a lot of walls around our hearts and things, and that's fine. They're fine with it. They just do what they can do. But it's just so exciting.
Yeah, I find that people are brought to us for a reason. And even if they are totally closed off to any of the spiritual woo-woo witchy stuff, they're still there for a reason. So showing up as we are authentically, even if it feels uncomfortable for both of us, I have found to be still the most impactful way to help people, because they're in your world for a reason, no matter what, and you're going to have the impact on them that you're meant to have. And speaking of that, I love your intention around wanting people to walk into your space and feel the energetic difference immediately, and to notice the difference when they leave. I mean, that's one of my main intentions with all of the work I do as well, and with future dreams I have for my business. And that's so beautiful. And where did your idea for this business come from? Was it come all at once? Was it more of a slow, ongoing process? How did that idea come to you?
Yeah, like I said, with my daughter, the kind of got me onto the horse train. And then I did work with I found a mentor and learned the work. And because I had a social work background, this counseling part was easy. I did my degree in counseling with kids. So I wasn't sure what it was going to look like. I'm much more clear now about how I do, of course, how I do the work and who I do it with. There was a lot of like, well, let's try this. Like I still have a lot of children clients. I have a lot of adult clients, so I do both. But I didn't know the how of it. I always figured it would be pretty witchy energy, that kind of thing, but I didn't necessarily know. And so it's been a real unfolding as to how both I stand in the work and how I have my own worthiness in it. For a long time, I was like, well, who am I? You know, these guys are like 1,000 pounds, spirit being connected. Oh my God. You know, once I started to see what was going on and who am I to stand in this? And now I know I've kind of come back around, which is cool, to that feeling of like being six, this tiny little body, and just having energy pour through me to be like, oh, that's what I'm doing. I hold a super strong space of intention and love and presence. And when I'm with them, I feel very different than the like Gemini go mind. Like I fall into this space of presence that just kind of from your work and I know that, and then I read the room in a beautiful way of like, okay, I need to say something. I used to say a lot more, again, as a Gemini, blah 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 about what was going on, and I still get this. I really have an intense wish for people to feel what I feel, because I feel so much from the horses. I know, like, when they are pouring their love on people, it is like, whoa, like you almost got to stand sideways because it's just coming at you so strong. And I can feel when people aren't letting that in, and that has to be okay. And I learn from the horses, like they're my coworkers. They're like, it's okay with them. It's
Mm-hmm.
got to be okay with me. So I have learned to get out of that intense need to fix or tell them or them know or them understand on a level. It's like exactly what, like you said, whatever is happening. You know, they're here, they're getting what they need to get, and it's a trust. And if they feel the call, they'll come back, and they do. Right now, the people that are coming are like, how do I have more of this? I need more of it. I need to do. And I'm like, okay, well, there's this program. And then and then they can just do their own. Like I say, 85, 90% of the program, probably even more, is the horses. That's why I've set it up. So, and of course, they've helped me intuitively set it up. I had it a very structured way that I thought, this is perfect. This is great. Just leave it. And they were like, no, no, no. So we had to change the whole thing just in January so that it could be more this. And I can see now, like, okay, this is much more supporting the people to strengthen their energetic signature space, all those things.
Yeah, it's always an unfolding, especially with intuitive led businesses like this. The clarity comes in time, and it often comes through trying things out and feeling how that feels and getting more rooted in your confidence with the work, which it sounds like has been unfolding for you as well. And I relate so much. When you're talking about, I guess, a bit of the imposter syndrome around who am I to be doing this work, I come back to that a lot too. And I think it's a combination of not taking ourselves so seriously, but taking the work we do seriously and knowing that it's an honor to be able to do it. And so allowing ourselves to do it and to take on that, it's a reverence in the work. It makes working just a spiritual practice. It makes it less about us and more about what we are offering to the world. And so that helps me step away from the imposter syndrome and the focus on myself and more into the energy of it all.
Yeah, I love that. Work as a spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm. And I love that the horses are your coworkers, and hopefully they continue to remind you of just tapping into the energy and how impactful the work you're offering is.
Yeah, and I have a lot of people that in mentorship, and they're like, how do I market, and how do I this, and I still feel sometimes in the trenches with this, but I've learned so much about being seen and being authentic and just really trusting that it takes time, and it takes time to build your worthiness and your ability to stand in it, and not looking around to see what the world wants you to do, and just really doing what is coming through you, because that's the gift, you know. um, yeah, there's a lot of, like unlearning what we think, or unlistening. Like I'm
Yeah.
pretty rebellious, and I get pretty like, I'm not doing it. That doesn't feel right. All that stuff doesn't feel right. And so I have to do it from what comes inside. And the less I hide, and the more I just be fully expressing me, the more people are attracted to it.
No, I marketing is it's such a journey when it comes to business for especially for someone who is so intuitive and just wants to focus on the work and the impact and the energy. And I always come back to if it doesn't feel right, for me, it's not. Like, who is to say that this way of marketing or this way of doing business is the right way? They're not me. They haven't lived my life or walked my path. This is one reason I love human design is because it shows us how different we all are and how one way of living and being isn't going to work for every single person. It's not one size fits all. And I think we all just have to remember that and also remind ourselves of that when we're searching and seeking for guides and for other people to tell us the answers. And I feel like your work can also really help people connect back to that inner voice, that intuition within themselves, and remind themselves that they have the answers within themselves.
Totally. Totally. It's always, to me, it's always really been, and even the last month in Becoming Wild was really about our, was it last month or the month before, really about where is our power? And horses use power in such a visceral way, right? You can feel their power. And often with us, we'll leak it or we'll give it or we'll put it externally, and really watching that on a day-to-day basis and conversation to conversation basis, even like, where is my power? Is it in me, or did I just give it in that conversation and that like experience? And yeah, they really show that. And they will do a simple exercise with somebody. I don't do a lot of exercises, like I don't do a lot of planning around sessions, but sometimes it'll be like, oh, this person needs a good boundary exercise, or how to fully embody their power,
Mm.
And so there's some stuff. I do a lot of liberty with the horses, which is like dancing with the horses with no ropes or anything. And so you're asking more questions at that point in relationship with a horse, and horses often will ask, like, often, pretty much always, when they're developing relationship, am I leading or are you leading? Not every horse will ask, but and then so how do you answer that, right? And so and they get an answer that fast. If they walk up, they take space as their commodity, right? And if they walk up to you and you step back as they push into your space, you're answering like, you go ahead, you
Mm.
get to. But they feel more peaceful when we say, I got it. And so we say that through energy, and we say that through holding our power and fully embodying our bodies. And so when we start to learn liberty work with them, we are asking them, will you dance with me? Will you walk with me? Will you trust me to, because rhythm also is something really soothing for their nervous systems. And so it's just, there's so many levels of building relationship and so many ways to teach how do we hold that power and watch how we lose it, or how we not lose it, but give it away.
Hmm.
Who am I to stand in front of this being and even like I go through that often where it's like, how can I ask you to do that? We get into the, oh, this has happened in this, the story about things, and they're just like, nah, just relate to me now, in this present moment, and let's do some stuff. Sometimes they're like, I'll be over here crazy. Get your shit
Yeah.
together. I'll be over here.
Don't bring your energy to me.
Yeah.
The whole time you were talking, I was thinking of my younger self who was so afraid of using my power and being seen powerful. And I think so many people are afraid of power, and that can be power in any sense of the word, whether that's just using our voice and being heard and advocating for ourselves and taking the lead, being a leader. I could just envision how helpful and transformative that practice with the horses can be for someone working through owning their power and owning being seen and not fearing standing in ourselves with confidence. I honestly think most people go throughout their lives giving their power away and being afraid of their power. And there's enough for all of us to stand in our power confidently.
Yeah, and they'll almost ignore us if we're not fully embodied. Like
Mm.
I stand beside them like, like an invitation to walk beside me. And I change my posture and my energy and everything and have intentions and thoughts. And if I am in my head, and I will do this with clients, if you're trying to get it right or do it a certain way, the way you're supposed to, and you're thinking about all these things, the horse is like, they're asleep. They're like, you don't even exist. But as soon as we come into our fullness and our confidence in our space and in our hearts, fully present on what we're doing, then they're like, oh, hi. And then they will come. They're interested.
Yeah, you can't fake it. You have to really genuinely embody it and just show. Again, it comes back to not taking ourselves so seriously, not taking it so seriously, just showing up lighthearted. And again, coming back to that confidence.
Yeah. And which is again why they like children often, is
Yeah.
because children are like, whatever, let's go do this fun thing that is crazy or whatever. And they're okay, or they're not.
You wrote somewhere that you say the horses led you on a journey through the 7 energy centers, the chakras. Can you go into that a bit more? I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, so since I did yoga teacher training years and years ago, that part really spoke to me, I guess because I've always understood energy, and that's how the horses work too, is with energy. I don't see energy, I know energy. I can be like, okay, that's an open path, that's a yes, that's a no, this is a. And so this made a lot of sense to me, these kind of vortexes or wheels of energy, and that they have meaning, and that they're in our bodies and outside our bodies and all this, and that the earth has them and the horses have them. And so when I started to understand kind of what, from root to crown, kind of what's going on, the theme, say, of each center, that's not the exact word, but you know what I mean, like the
Mhm.
root chakra and the grounding and the feeling safe and our connection to our ancestors and our family's origin and our belief systems and all these things, and how that's connected to fear. And so watching how these were working in my own life, and then noticing how the horses were helping people with that. Like, even for example, yesterday I came home from a road trip for a week. Luna, she's bypassed everybody in her ability to take space. So some would call her a leader. I don't necessarily say she's a leader yet. She's very young and she's still coming into her confidence as a leader. So I know she looks to me a lot, especially since she's now the one that can push everybody around physically in the herd, that she looks to me as a leader. So that's really made me need to be a leader. She asked, well, when I first got home at midnight and fed them, she asked, or she was a little bit snippy and pushy and not very thrilled with me. And then I went out and I thought, I need to reground in. I need all this energy. That's traveling is a lot for energy, right? And I am honoring that more and more as I get more aware of it. But I really saw it even with them coming back, and I spent time really regrounding with them. And she was putting her butt right in front of me so that I would put my hand on her and connect to her root chakra and my root chakra and connect back into the physicality of here. And she just wanted that and then I got massaging her butt muscles because they love that and all this, but she wanted all this like trust, grounding energy between me and her to go on for both of us. And so just that's how they kind of walked me through. And I had all these lessons that I put into the book that were I kind of just categorized them in, they were personal power, solar plexus lessons, or they were throat chakra lessons or whatever, and how they just went through it. And and that's how I ran my program before, my teaching program. And now they've busted me out of that. They're like, even that structure, you can't hold you're not allowed to have the safety of that anymore. Now you have to be really just intuitively connecting each month to us. What's the theme that's coming through? What are we teaching? And I'm like, terrifying, but fine, I'll do it.
I love that. I'm really excited to read about that in your book. So, speaking of finding our voice and showing up authentically, what is something that you used to feel shame around that you've learned to embrace in yourself or accept in yourself?
Yeah, emotion for sure, and the bigness of it all. I've always been a expresser. If I think back to my childhood self, I'd love to sing and dance and act and just express myself. Not that that wasn't encouraged, because my family was pretty great about it, other than my brother, who didn't want me wanted me to shut up all the time. But emotionally, have always felt like a lot. And so to now see that that's such, in all my art, if it's not emotional and deep, and I have a Scorpio moon, so to me, that's like, let's get deep and emotional, but
I
and
have
intense.
a I have a Scorpio rising, so
Yeah. So you and now I'm seeing like that's in everything I do. If I write a song, it has to be emotional and intense. And if I paint a painting, it had, and so I'm like, well, obviously this is what I'm supposed to be bringing out, and when I do those videos on Instagram, people are like, I connected to blah, blah, blah when you were being vulnerable and honest about, and I'm like, okay, so this is obviously something in me that is wanted and people can see themselves in. And so I have to stop hiding because Scorpio is also like, oh, let's just hide that. And I spent my childhood just hiding everything. Nobody knew how much I was struggling inside,
Mhm.
So now I'm like, okay, world, it's coming. You asked for it. Watch out.
Yes, I feel the same way. Well, what is something you wish people talked about more, or that even you wish you could talk about more?
Probably the same thing. My husband is Quebecois and he came into our lives. My family is very much like, we know we love each other. We don't need to talk about it. And he is very expressive verbally about how much he appreciates everybody and how much he loves everybody. And some people can really, I think, feel it coming at them. Like I kind of did at the beginning where I was like, that's a lot of love. Like, I don't know if I can handle it. And also joy, like anxiety kind of, I saw this quote of something about like, it's a learning of how to hold, healing is a learning how to hold more joy. And that's how I feel about life is like, I spent so much of my life worrying and in fear and just processing fear for me and collective and everybody ancestors. And now I'm like, no, I just want there to be all this space for joy and love. And I still feel like too much with that. Like I just have love running through me like crazy. And I do still feel like, oh, that person's not ready for it. That's okay. Instead of like shutting my own self down, be like, you're too much. Just be like, they're not ready. That's okay. I'm not an idiot about it. I'm very respectful and understand that not everybody wants a big old bear hug all 24/7, but just accepting that part of me and also seeing when I want to hide it or when I want to, or why, and watching that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
wish people expressed their kidness more often.
I really love that quote, hold healing is learning how to hold more joy, because that's really been my experience. I've grown, which it sounds like you had as well, so used to the anxiety and the fear and that pain. And so we grow attached to that. And that starts to feel more comfortable and more safe because it's known. And so as we begin to heal and embrace this new way of being, it can feel scary to embrace the joy and to feel the joy and to feel the love, and letting go of the pain and making more space for the joy is part of the healing process. And it brings with it grief and it brings with it anxiety in a different form. And I think that that's not part of the experience that people talk about often or understand.
Yeah, I remember waking up one day on holiday with my husband and being like, can I feel this happy? Like, I'm
Mm.
scared. What if something bad happens? And it was still that like building again, like building energetic strength, building capacity to hold joy. It was like,
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes feeling like the rug's gonna get ripped out from under you, so you don't want to feel the joy in the first place. I mean,
yeah.
that's been my experience, but we have to let ourselves feel, we deserve to feel the joy. We need to let it in. When it comes to your intuition, do you have a practice that you do to work on strengthening it? When you say you get all these messages and these downloads and even your conversations and connections with the horses, how do you ground into that and work on that connection?
Yeah, so I get most of my intuitive downloads when I'm out walking in nature. I take one of my dogs or two of them, usually one because two is too distracting. It takes me out of myself. And so I always have to find those places where I can stay in myself, be open, and then let go of thoughts. And so that's walking in the woods for me. And just on a walk where I don't have to be back, there's no time, there's just no constrictions around it, or constraints. And so I do that. I try to do that daily. It doesn't always happen. And then I take my voice notes or whatever, and I just often have to talk to myself in the forest because otherwise they're gone, a lot of that. And then I do animal communication regularly with the horses so that we can, making sure everything's, and I can do that more than I do. Life there can be a lot of poo picking and not a lot of family meetings with them. So I have to constantly remind myself to do that. But it's also like I'm with them all the time. And so I'm checking in intuitively all the time, like we're with each other's bodies physically and asking and checking and making sure everything's okay. And then things will come up in that space, where I think I'm cleaning their feet out, but really, something's happening and something's shifting, or I'm having an awareness. And the amount of unawareness that I still have with them, they're on a different level. So it's always learning and always understanding more and just opening. It's like a slow opening to what it is that they're offering, really, and that all of nature is offering us.
And if we let ourselves be open to it, what we need to know will come in the timing it needs to come. When you were talking, I kept thinking about how you have created these rituals for yourselves, whether it's walking with your dogs in nature, feeding the horses. And so there's that structure, but then you allow complete freedom and wildness within the structure. And that leaves the space for the intuitive messages to come and for that connection to come. And that is very similar to my practice as well. And I think that combination of ritual and freedom leads to an intuitively connected life in a lot of ways.
Totally. And back to the space too, right? Like I can be in here and my mind can go off and meditate easily. Whereas inside, it's very hard because there's things to think about, like in the house. I think we have to get really disciplined about how, and I know people often, artists and spiritual people don't like that word, but I've really found how like the masculine and the feminine within me have both really helped each other in that, where I'll be like, I came out of government work being like, I'm free and I'm in my feminine and I'm and don't try to tie me down and like all this. And now with having business and understanding myself more and really kind of wanting to rein all that in, I see how much structure can help both in how I do my business and also physical. I come here, I feel safe, I can open. And that definitely started as an outside structure, right? Nature. I feel, okay, I'm at the barn, but I also need it honestly, I need it for when I'm doing computer work. I need to feel that same structure and safety. Whereas I was just too wild and free in my own, which is what I want to be. But sometimes you got to dial it in a little bit.
Well, the way I love to think about it is the more structured masculine energy is the riverbank. Like it's the rocks and the gravel. It's like all the things surrounding it. And then the feminine flowing energy is the river moving through. But the river wouldn't be able to be there if it didn't have the riverbank like stabilizing it. And so we definitely need both. And for me, I do have my own story around the word discipline. So I love to use the word devotion. Like, what are we devoted to? What are we pouring our energy and attention and time into? And that's what I'm prioritizing. And that's what I'm staying consistent with. And I think just the energetic shift for me between discipline and devotion can help.
I love that. Yeah.
So living intuitively wild means living dedicated to your true, authentic self, no matter what. How do you feel like you live intuitively wild?
Yeah, I feel like I'm very dedicated to that, and that I do that on the daily basis with bringing myself back if I get too into like, the internet or people's stories. I'm becoming much more boundaried around or just discerning around what makes me feel like I'm in that space of being intuitively wild, and just more and more of that. And that brings me so much into being aligned with myself and living this life of joy and ease and creativity, right?
So beautifully put. Well, please share with everyone where they can connect with you and find you. I mean, I know I, for one, am dreaming about visiting you on your farm in British Columbia. Like that would be a dream. And I definitely want to read your book. So please just share all your offerings with everyone.
Yeah. So on Instagram at Soulfarm Sanctuary is my Instagram. My website is thirzavoysey.com, which you can also go to soulfarm.ca and it'll just take you there, which is easier to spell. SOUL farm. And then my book, The Wild in Us, is on Amazon. You can get it from me, you can get it in some more local book places. And Becoming Wild is my signature membership program right now that I'm pouring myself into. That's also on the website under Work with Me. And we have quite a cool group of humans in there who are really being called by the horses, and they don't know why. Usually they just come in like, I don't know, I'm feeling the call, what can I do? And I always say, often people come for a session and then they're like, I need more. And I'll say, well, you can come back for a session, or you can get into this program where you get to work with the horses, either the herd here or a herd wherever you are, and just keep building and building relationship and magic with them.
Yeah, everything will be linked below. And I recently moved to upstate New York, and there's lots of farmland around here. I'm feeling inspired to connect with some horses here. So we'll see how that calling goes.
That's great. Thank you so much for this. I absolutely enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. This was so wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Intuitively Wild, the podcast. I hope it helped deepen your connection to yourself, sparked some insights, and inspired you to live intuitively wild. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would share it with others and leave a rating and review. And please reach out to me. I would love to connect with you. I will see you next time for more magic.